All right, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. This is the Zero Trust panel, the future of secure networking, Zero Trust as a business enabler. My name is Mark Dreyfus. I'm a network solutions engineer. I also focus on managed services. In this panel, we're going to explore how Zero Trust is redefining secure networking, driving cloud adoption, resilience, and customer trust. Join me in welcoming our panelists today, Chris Bonavita, VP Strategy and Technology Adoption at GTT. Trevor Beidel, CISO at US Signal. Ed Lovelace, Head of Product, Managed Edge and Cybersecurity at Zayo. And Doug Schultz, Director, Strategic Partnership, Level Blue, formerly known as TrustWave. All right, let's jump in. Zero Trust as a business enabler. Trevor, why should enterprises view Zero Trust as more than a security safeguard?
From my perspective, one of the biggest things Zero Trust enables is security is no longer the roadblock. So whether that's mergers and acquisition, digital transformation, new application stand-up, Zero Trust lets you move faster because you're not having to pull if it's ideally implemented, you're not having to pull as many teams in, configure as many things. The other piece is it does really line you up well if you're implementing it so that if you have to follow compliance standards, you're already hitting many of the metrics there.
Awesome. Doug, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I think Trevor's spot on, and it really just becomes a springboard for all your other technology initiatives, right? So if you can adopt Zero Trust in a way that's effective to your company, all of a sudden your employees are more operationally efficient, right? It's easier to log into things or access the tools that you need without jumping through a bunch of different hurdles, and also allows you then to chase other strategic initiatives that you maybe otherwise couldn't pursue from a flexibility standpoint. So I think any successful Zero Trust initiative lands on a business enabler first, the security outcome almost becomes secondary, right?
Yeah, it's a great step one, and as you said, a springboard for next steps as you modernize security. Cloud adoption in hybrid environments. I'm sorry, no, wrong question. Ed, how does Zero Trust redefine the way networks are architected?
So I think it takes the network from the traditional castle and moat perspective and redefines it as an application. The network becomes a transport-only problem set where it doesn't really matter where you are or how you get there. It's now about what you're trying to get to and who needs to get to it. So it reforms your network as a focus on identity first. Who is it? What should they do? And then where are they trying to go? And are they allowed to do it? Whereas traditionally it was, hey, you're welcome to the company. We're going to cut you a copy of the master key. Please don't share it with anybody, and use the front door wisely. It takes us from the old physical security meets logical security model to the physical security model is nothing like the user security model and the application security model.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now that you have, don't take anything in the house, even though you have full run of it, right? Like that's a lot of trust that we're putting in there, and that's not always going to work. Doug, did you have a response?
Yeah, I think it just makes you much more flexible in terms of how you deploy connectivity, right? So you nailed it, right? Castle moat, there's no more perimeter anymore, right? So suddenly, no matter where your folks are, no matter what they need access to, no matter how they get to those things, you can do it, right? So you don't have to worry necessarily about building infrastructure in a certain way or in a certain direction. It's just make it happen, right? So makes you much more easily adaptable in terms of network performance, network growth, and network flexibility.
Yeah, I think just a good tangible example, you've got a highly secure network and your HVAC guy needs to monitor the HVAC unit.
Yeah.
Do you bring in a third-party circuit, separate services, all this stuff separately, or do you just isolate that as an application and give him access to that, nothing else, right?
Makes a lot more sense than having all that extra effort. One of the issues we find is, sometimes a political one, is getting, boards and C-suites to move on new initiatives that change is scary for a lot of folks, and everything's working fine. We don't want to spend more money. How can leaders position Zero Trust to boards and C-suites as an innovation driver? And that's for Chris.
Presenting to the board. So one of the things that we find is that when you create the Zero Trust framework and you consider that as a framework and as a governance principle, then that applies uniformly across the business. And when you take a concept from Zero Trust as a solution set, You actually transfer when you're presenting to the board and presenting to the rest of the business, the opposite, absolute trust. What are the things that are absolutely relevant to your business, that are most effective, most desirous for your outcomes? And you relate those to your zero trust framework. And so when you create a balance on enabling the business to achieve the absolute best that it can, facilitating the applications, the workloads, and the services and infrastructure that your folks need, it allows the board and allows your investors to focus on where are they putting money into maximizing that return on investment. And so Zero Trust becomes a facilitator for that absolute alignment of business outcomes and the folks that need the resources to achieve them.
Anyone have follow-up?
I'm just going to add to that the enablement of like time compression. You're in the M&A space. You want to do acquisition. It's no longer okay. Let's get the networks interconnected and get them online. It's who needs this application access tomorrow, and we'll give them that application, and we'll figure out all the other stuff later. But the business critical day one access to this key application we're going to enable the new business with, we can roll that out immediately. Welcome to the new business. You've been acquired. Here's your access.
It does make things a lot easier when you're onboarding. It just here's another user. Boing, there you go. So it works better.
It's a universal framework too.
Yeah.
So however you have the underlying tool sets, when you have that universal framework, it's easy to communicate it. It resonates with everyone. So that's another benefit.
This question's for Trevor. What frameworks help executives measure return on investment beyond compliance and risk reduction?
I go with a balanced scorecard method. So developer productivity is an example. Time to market for product development. If you're developing a product that's dependent on your technologies, can you cut that cycle time for a new product to market? Insurance cost reduction, being able to show cost savings to the board. M&A due diligence is huge for companies that are doing repetitive M&A acquisitions across the year. You've already mentioned that one. But being able to show that cycle time with that. And then also from a net promoter score and due diligence tracking. So if you're the vendor being due diligenced, being able to hit all the marks, especially with some of the vendors, say tier one automotive suppliers, where they're tracking or CMMC, you're able to hit those metrics with it. Also, if you do have a security incident, your net promoter score afterwards showing that, hey, we were able to contain this down and minimize the blast radius are several of the ways that I've presented it out to our board.
Yeah, especially if you can show that you've contained it. Yes. You know, they're like, oh, that's great. The response was effective. You know, you never know until something happens.
Yeah. Another one that is I would say very platform dependent is several of the solutions can do user experience monitoring as part of that. So being able to monitor that and show latency or connectivity and being able to show for teams, hey, not a board level stat, but something to management teams showing, hey, your users are having this good experience, the network is working, the old perception of I'm always on the VPN, it's slow, goes away. You're able to demonstrate.
And then even like reducing ticket times, right? So if you're trying to win over like the IT staff or your help desk, all the time you've been spent trying to troubleshoot home broadband that's choppy video all of a sudden, right, goes away, and you can spend that on real business outcomes instead.
Yeah, no, those items that don't matter, that's such an awful time suck a lot of the time. Ed, what are the biggest hurdles in implementation? Is it people, process, technology, or something else?
I think the human nature is probably the biggest obstacle. We've got bad habits, right? I talked about the castle mold thing. Our first reaction is, well, just put a perimeter around it, whatever it is. And even when you subdivide things, it's, well, let's just make a smaller perimeter. And we're kind of doing the same thing with ZTNA, but we don't often go far enough with it. So I think just adopting a different mindset that we don't need these things that we used to do because we're doing it a different way is probably the biggest hurdle. And I think, technology-wise, people have a lot of skeletons in the closet. If you don't have your identity figured out and you know who your users are systematically, that's your first problem. You got to fix that first. And we kind of assume everyone's got that figured out, but you get in the weeds, you find a lot of skeletons there where there's multiple identity providers and all those things, and no one really knows who's who. So I think it's really good to do you know who your people are? You have some vague idea of what they're meant to do, and then you can start the process of doing it. And you got to really think about I'm not going to just apply this as another VPN replacement. This is okay, application first, and we're going to slowly phase it in. So yes, it may be going in as a VPN replacement. We got to think about like where we're trying to get to, and then what's the first step that takes us towards that, and then you find that you get this kind of return on investment curve that becomes a bit like a roller coaster. It starts to take off, and it gets easier and easier and easier as you go down. That first one is a real hurdle, but changing your mindset, understanding who your people are and what you're trying to solve to, and then what the first step is that gets the most like, user acceptance is the other, I think, big piece of that where that moves the needle. And I was like, actually, this actually kind of works. It works better than my old one. I want off the VPN. I want on the new solution, right? And then you get the adoption. So it's getting the train moving is the hard part.
I would also throw in culture. You mentioned it, but many companies are siloed that identity and access is one team, firewalls are another team, servers are another team, networks another team. And most of the ZTNA technologies blend all of those. And getting people that have been doing this for 20 or 30 years to play nice with each other and recognize you have to trust your other team members because everyone could be in there flipping switches. It's one of the first things you have to take on with them is network is no longer just a network team. It's an interdisciplinary solution.
And then that's a big challenge, man.
What we've also enjoyed over the last year or so is the separation of Zero Trust from ZTNA. And so applying Zero Trust as a concept across the entire enterprise or at least across the technology estate. So focusing on, as you mentioned, it's not simply a VPN replacement or a remote access replacement. And so the decoupling and you hear more about just Zero Trust as a framework, as a concept, as governance, and then you have the product sets that fulfill that underneath it. So that's been both a barrier and a means to more adoption now that's been decoupled and people are starting to think of this across the enterprise.
Yeah, like the principle of least privilege, right? So giving people access only to the things they need, very sound logic, but it's just a change that people need to go, yeah, that does make sense. Let's do it that way. All right, so skip ahead a little bit here. Chris, I'm going to give you a question about the future of Zero Trust. What role, and this is everyone's favorite, what role will AI and automation play in advancing Zero Trust strategy?
AI.
Yeah, I know. I haven't heard of it.
So initially, and especially over the next couple of years, AI facilitates efficiency. It doesn't necessarily replace functions. It may at some point, but it creates additional efficiencies. So applying AI against behaviors and large data sets against anticipated behaviors. Zero Trust starts with identification, roles, responsibilities, who should have access to what, and then you apply that into what are the behaviors that are being noticed across your applications, across your network, across your data sets. Are those things matching? And AI is very powerful in the large data sets in assimilating the data and looking for nuances and changes in behavior. Are these malicious activities? Are these functional behavioral changes? And that's where AI is going to give us the biggest uptick in understanding Zero Trust and applying it in the workplace as this evolves over the next couple of years. Beyond that, ask AI, and AI will tell you what's happening next.
I think one other area I'm seeing for this will be rule building and rule analysis, being able to look at traffic flows, connectivity patterns, and using AI to do the data crunching to say, okay, there should be a rule for this, or this rule is not being used because it's not tweaked this way. We do that with our email platform right now for email security. Is it will go in and look at a current rule, analyze it and say, let's make this change so it'll hit the target. We're seeing that being roadmapped into some of the platforms now as a future state as well.
I think just like assessing the health and success of your Zero Trust program, I think will be aided pretty heavily by AI, right? You mentioned to Chris, like having that kind of broader insight and visibility into everything that flows through your network and what your users are doing, and then being able to take broad conclusions from that, I think will be helpful. Because right now, you might have a tool set, you might have policies, but the actual execution and maintenance of that program, I think, can be an ongoing challenge for people. Once you solve the Zero Trust problem, how do you continue to not break it?
But I think I'll just add, since we're talking AI, like where you're going in that space is AI enables you to do some really cool things where it's no longer just you have access. It's you have access, but you don't usually access it during these hours based on your behavior. So we're going to make a dynamic rule that when you do, we're going to make you jump through 3 hoops to get in rather than 2, right? So AI lets you do that response a little bit better, even more nuanced based on behavior. But just to call it, if you're doing no AI and you're against AI, your threat actors are. And the threats are evolving faster and faster, and their ability to compromise you and take advantage of your lack of ZTNA or your lack of good posture is increasing, whether or not you're directly embracing AI directly.
An extension of that, you just keyed on something. So the other thing that AI can help you with is the hypotheticals, is taking into a digital twin environment, or taking into a hypothetical of a containment exercise or a tabletop practice, or putting your policies into practice. And it can emulate. The wonderful thing about AI is that it can take production data or take real-time data, put it in a simulated environment, and run scenarios against it that look like real-time, that look and feel like it would really be occurring. And then you can base additional containment strategies or incident response strategies around that. So that's another area, the simulations and emulations that AI can do. Keep a constant proving out, are we doing the right things or are we not? What do we need to look at?
All real good conversation there. It's a big unknown, but like we're starting to figure out ways that it's going to help, and it's going to be really interesting to watch it evolve over time as we progress with that. Trevor and Ed, Trevor, why don't you start? How are enterprises balancing legacy systems with zero trust?
So I would say doing it in a phase where it's segment and modernize. So those systems that are very complex, very old, segment those out with micro-segmentation. Take a phased approach in terms of looking at your estate and saying, okay, VPN is usually an easy target. Cloud-native apps come in, and looking then at the legacy on-prem apps and seeing, can I use an identity proxy? Are there other technologies I can use to bring those in? Or is this a true app where it just needs to be burned to the ground and rebuilt in the future? And recognizing that and saying, okay, we segment that down, put additional controls on that in other ways within the zero trust security architecture that may not rely, for example, as heavily on identity. But it's really trying to go through and prioritize out all of your estate and saying, okay, these are the most critical assets, and then which ones are the most difficult to do? Segment those first, get them protected, and then hit your wins of those things that can be quickly adopted.
So I'll just add on there, like ZTNA is a wrapper for old legacy technology is another piece of it. Like if you've been in business for 10 or more years, you probably have a piece of legacy tech that no one wants to talk about that doesn't support SSO, and you're not going to get rid of it because it's essential to the business.
Yeah.
So if you got to go old school and create a little subnet around that and ZTNA that subnet, call it an application, and apply ZTNA as an overlay and a wrapper for it and put your SSO in the ZTNA, that works. That's a whole lot better than just leaving it open and ignoring it. So yeah, as a bit of a wrapper for the really old stuff that you just can't make compliant, it's a really good way of micro-segmenting that little piece of your skeletons.
I think that's a really good point because everyone has those applications that like they want to get rid of but can't. So it's a legacy application for this, that, or whatever. But that's a really, really fair point. All right, Chris. What mistakes should organizations avoid in their zero trust journey?
First and foremost, believing that zero trust as a concept is going to solve all the problems in and of itself. So we've talked a little bit here about you still need to have the rigor and understand what the identity criteria are, what the anticipated behaviors are. You just can't throw it as a solution set or as a product set and solve the world problems. And as much as that sounds simple, that is something that we have to fight against because we're all busy and we all would like a simple solution. The other area that I just emphasize is that zero trust is an enterprise-wide concept, so it can't be deployed or considered or designed in a vacuum, and it needs to be understood and participated with and participated in from the design phase through the deployment and the reviews across your enterprise. So this is truly an opportunity for the IT and the security departments to come together and lead the rest of the organization into zero trust enablement.
Can I jump in on there too?
Sure.
The other thing is it's okay to start small.
Yeah.
It's okay. It compromise, like conflicting with what I said. Like if you turn it on as a VPN replacement, at the very least, you're going to get visibility to what's going on for once. And you can start figuring, okay, you know what, everyone's doing this one thing. Let's lock that down first. That becomes our first application we tackle. So even if you're not ready to figure it all out at once, it's a good first step to get some visibility to then figure out what you got to figure out. Because a lot of us are running blind.
I think you're spot on. It's a spectrum, right? So zero trust isn't just a zero sum one or the other. There's stages alongside, and I think the big pitfall we see in our world is just diving into tech first without thinking about what the outcomes are, right? So like one of the questions we get all the time is, do you guys sell zero trust? And we go, well, kind of, but like it's not just like in a box that you hand to somebody, right?
Peace
like,
of mind.
Yeah.
You
So
sell peace of mind.
yeah, exactly. So you guys are right on it. It's an organizational, enterprise-wide initiative. Everyone's got to be on board, no matter whatever whatever your title is. If you're not bought in and collaborating to make that happen, you're not going to get it off the ground successfully, right? At least not in the long term. So just buying a tool and doing that as your first step to be pursuing zero trust tends to lead to a negative outcome, in our opinion.
Yeah, you absolutely have to not think that buying a single solution or even multiple solutions, nothing is far from forget with security, right? You have to continue to adapt it, make sure everyone's using it, then make changes as you find out this may not work, so we're going to have to tweak it a little bit more and change internal policies around it, because people are going to try and get around things, right?
Now, to be clear, if you all want to buy a tool, come on, that's fine, right? But we'll help you figure out what the end goal is and how you're going to accomplish it first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add to that is one of the biggest things I've seen is the CIOs, CISOs like myself fall for the shiny new tool, and they say zero trust, and then the director of IT, the CIO, doesn't understand why all of a sudden their org isn't zero trust yet. It's that's the first step of a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you might have to buy this tool and that tool, but it's also the hard work in between that'll get you there.
Yeah,
Just to state the obvious, you got to know what you're securing before you can secure it.
Yeah.
always true. Let's talk some advice for leaders. Trevor, what are some questions that CIOs and CISOs should ask when evaluating zero trust readiness? Dovetails in nicely.
Number one, do we know all of our identities and where our identities come from? And that's human, machine, programmatic, having an inventory of those and getting them together from all the various systems. Where's our data? And is it classified? So if all of it's on one file server at headquarters, that's a great thing. But understanding where you're trying to protect and what data you're trying to protect, because the other nice thing that ZTNA helps with, or Zero Trust helps with, is being able to move that data around. So being able to quantify or classify that. And another one is, honestly, is a good leader, is our culture in a place where we can adopt this? And taking that right up front as a leader, recognizing people is the number one thing. And if the culture isn't there, working on culture before you go buy a technology.
Anybody have follow-up?
You better be ready to go first, right? Are you prepared to adopt the new norm on your side, or are you going to want the exceptions and then the full, trust me for everything access?
Yeah.
If you tie the concept to the business outcomes, and this is a great opportunity, if you tie the concepts of the zero trust that could be perceived in a vacuum as a roadblock, if you tie it to the outcomes and show the enablement that we talked about or that align into your individual businesses, you're going to have a much better chance of affecting the culture and creating alignment and creating a good feedback loop from the users and the experience that's out there in the field. So alignment is a very key aspect of your leadership opportunity.
I've got a customer right now I'm working with where that culture piece is really playing in. They're trying to extend MFA out further into their org, and there's very heavy pushback from the leaders in the org, and they're recognizing the mistake that they made was not educating the business outcomes of why this is a good thing. And the pushback they were initially getting is, well, I'm at HQ. Why do I need to use MFA? It's like, well, if your computer was compromised, this could happen. Here, if we do this, this business outcome happens, this business outcome happens. And as he started doing that, he started getting less and less pushback.
Yep.
And it really, that culture piece of understanding that because if you can give them the business reason, the ball will move faster.
Just out of like tying it to a good user outcome, like security is historically the department of no.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be the department of, hey, we got a tool that's going to make your life easier end user, and we want you to want it first.
Yeah.
Because then the rollout becomes easy. If you're pushing it on them, they're going to push back because I don't want to do this. It's got 15 steps versus, hey, people working from home, your Zoom's going to work a whole lot faster when you enable this tool. 5 minutes later, it's installed.
Yeah, it's definitely how you spin it is very important for user adoption, because if you say, oh, this is really difficult thing, we're going to have to deploy it. No. How is this going to benefit you? How is this going to make your life easier? How is it going to make you more secure? So this last question here wasn't one of the ones we focused on, but I think we have time for one more here. In general, and Chris, if you want to start, or not.
No.
What challenges do enterprises face when trying to apply zero trust to hybrid or multi-cloud environments?
So hybrid and so you have the convergence of a lot of different things happening at the same time. So in hybrid cloud, polycloud, you have the repatriation, or you have some of the reassessment of what's going on in your cloud environment. That's happening right now at an aggressive rate. And so when you combine that with zero trust, everything that we just talked about in terms of knowing what your identities are, knowing what your workloads expectations are, knowing what those anticipated end results and outcomes are, is a little convoluted right now, while you're also evaluating your cloud infrastructure and where these things should sit and live. In actuality, if you take an approach to your cloud and polycloud environment and start with a zero trust framework, you're going to actually create efficiencies in what should sit where. As several people mentioned, where is your data? Where should it be? What needs to be protected, and quite honestly, what doesn't need the same level of protection. And you apply that against your premise-based core data center, private cloud, public cloud environments, and you now have an option to align all of those different capabilities against your overall zero trust governance and zero trust framework. So if you do it the other way around and you take a zero trust governance and framework first and then apply it into your reevaluation of your cloud infrastructure, you have a better chance.
I think it goes back to almost like the network infrastructure piece of this conversation, right? Is aligning for that flexibility. And so, Chris, you nailed it. If you have the framework built, it enables you then to say, maybe we are good for polycloud. Or in a previous world where you didn't have that enabled, maybe you had to be more strict about where you could or couldn't deploy resources or applications, right? So it puts you in that position where you can be more flexible of how you deploy your stuff.
Just to call it, the biggest issue you're going to hit in that process, if you're kind of halfway through it and you're like, oh, let's do ZTNA now, it's knowing who's using what and how they're getting there. You may think you know, but you're going to find a few things you don't know. There's probably some ACL in place or something that's been in place just to kind of make it work, and it's been working, and you suddenly move it to a new cloud and you discover all those routing rules that never got disclosed to you and who's actually using and what applications. And that's the biggest concern, is finding some way to audit proactively what impacts are we going to have, who's actually using this thing versus the people we think are using it. That's probably one of the biggest roadblocks if you're kind of in the middle of it, middle of that cloud sprawl, and you got to figure out to a new location. Like it was mentioned, if you go ZTNA first in that thought process, it's going to make the whole process easier to say, hey, we're going to go here. Who needs to get to it? Let's define those things first, and then we can implement it either the old way or the new way, but at least we've answered all the important questions. So when we want to go full ZTNA, we're ready to go.
All right.
I was just going to throw in one of the big things with, if you're dealing with the multi-cloud environment, is over communication around this, because if you're achieving something in, say, Azure, how you achieve that in GCP or AWS or an on-prem is going to be different. And if there's a business outcome and a security outcome, you want to make sure they're both understood so that people that need access still have access at the end of the day, and people that shouldn't have access. I think the AWS S3 buckets are a perfect example of this, of people that didn't work in that environment tried to put data there, and AWS wasn't putting the minimum guardrails around the environment. People didn't know that, put data out there. It's just sitting on the wide open internet. So over communicating your business objective and your security objectives with that data so that everyone can translate that into their line of work. So if you have AWS specialists that are working with Azure specialists and they're not the same person, they both understand what the goal is.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Any questions from you guys? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.